Well, in Zelensky's words that you just referred to, which he made yesterday, is look, the war is now inside Russia, as well as inside Russian occupied territory, and this is right, and this is natural because Ukraine is defending itself and has done for almost 18 months against a Russian aggression. And so something has to be done to show Vladimir Putin, look, there are consequences for what you've done. Let's be very clear here that the drone attacks on Moscow are significant symbolically. They are not to be equated with what Russia's been doing in terms of killing thousands or tens of thousands of civilians. We're talking about individual drones striking office buildings and, in fact, not even causing injuries. But just seeing those drones hit those buildings, and let's be clear, the drones that hit two office buildings last weekend were not downed by Russian air defense. If they had been downed, they wouldn't have struck at the angle that they did. When they construct office buildings that contain Russian ministries, and there were at least three Russian ministries in that office building, it shows that Vladimir Putin cannot show that he and his inner elite are invulnerable against, what they have launched, not only against Ukraine, but against the rest of the world.
How far might that sort of decision to target Russia itself and, of course, what Russia considers its territories at the moment?
Well, again, Bev, I think we need to take this step by step and try to talk about realities versus some chest thumping from the Russians. Now, when the Russians say, "Oh, if you attack us, we're going to strike back. We're going to hit you even harder." Remember that Russia has claimed five Ukrainian regions: Crimea since 2014, two regions in the east, and two regions in the south, Zaporizhia and Kherson. And what they're saying here is, if you try to regain any of your territory, about 20% of the country, that's an attack on Russia. Now, quite clearly, Ukraine's not going to accept that condition, and I suspect that most rational people would think, well, no, they really shouldn't. When you talk about going inside Russia, I think there are lines to be drawn. To attack military installations and to attack supporting installations for the military, like oil and ammunition depots, like railway lines, has been going on for some time. And I think Ukraine's allies and partners, including Australia, will accept this. What I don't think they would accept is Ukrainian strikes which are aimed at mass groups of Russian civilians, nor any type of Ukrainian land invasion to go in and to seize Russian territory. But that's not what we're talking about here. And indeed, it is not something that I think is in, what Kiev is looking for. They just want their territory back, and they'll carry out attacks inside Russia against the military and symbolic attacks to reinforce that message.
Yeah, and that will be unsettling for Moscow. Former Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said he raised the potential of using nuclear weapons if there were attacks on Russia. How might they be weighing that option? We've seen some brutal responses to Ukrainian gains.
Well, Bev, for 18 months, we've had Russian officials, including Vladimir Putin, thump their chest and say, we've got those nuclear weapons, we've got those nuclear weapons. And there's probably 2 points to make here. First is when you hit a bully in the nose, the bully shouts even louder. Why are you doing that to me? Which is what Mr. Medvedev, the former president, has done in the last 24 hours. Secondly, what they're doing is they're trying not really to say we're going to be using nuclear weapons. They're trying to make others wobbly. Those people who are supporting Ukraine, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Australia, and say, oh gosh, we really can't back Kyiv or else Putin's going to come after all of us. And all I can tell you is that from a practical point of view, if Putin uses a nuclear weapon on the battlefield, one, it doesn't change the battlefield situation. And two, it will just simply isolate Russia, even from countries like China and India, who have made it clear to Putin, no, we will not tolerate the use of nuclear weapons. That's not acceptable in the 21st century.
Scott, how do you assess Ukraine's counteroffensive and how it's progressing?
Gradual. It's gradual. It's not like the breakthrough, the sudden rush that liberated so much of Ukraine last autumn. And I think for that reason, we've gotten a lot of misleading headlines in the press, which Russia tries to feed, including Vladimir Putin today. Oh, this Ukraine's been defeated. In fact, Ukraine has taken almost 250 square kilometers of territory in the east and in the south. They have advanced towards the port city of Melitopol in the south. They are surrounding Bakhmut in the east. So I said when this counteroffensive started almost 8 weeks ago, it's not a sprint. It's more like a 1,500-meter race. I think it will continue to take territory. It will continue to get military support from the West and from the international community, enabling it to progress, provided the Russians cannot use disinformation to break public opinion in countries that are backing Kyiv up to this point.
Yeah. You know, there was the possibility of peace talks raised by Putin over the weekend. We know that he doesn't often speak with honesty. What are the chances, do you think? Has he been rattled enough to consider sitting down and starting to talk?
No. Now, I'm going to give you the immediate story you asked about, and then I'm going to give you the real story that's even bigger. Vladimir Putin was on stage for days with representatives from Africa at a summit last week. And, you know, the Russians, who have cut off grain supplies to Africa by blockading Ukraine's ports, with Putin ripping up the Black Sea deal just last week, they've got to play nice with the Africans. Oh, we'll give you free grain. We're here to make peace. It's just those Ukrainians that aren't allowing it. Even the African leaders who were there didn't buy it. So, no, Putin's not going to negotiate. Here's the big story. The peace talks that will be taking place are going to occur in a few days in, of all places, Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah. The Saudis, who have been on the fence during this up to now, have invited more than 30 countries, the US, the EU, India, Brazil, Ukraine itself, Zambia. Those countries are going to discuss Ukrainian peace proposals that have been on the table for some time to try to end the Russian invasion. Now, for countries that are from the so-called global south, to be doing this is a huge shift. They are no longer standing aside or sitting on their hands. And I think that conference next week will be the most important diplomatic conference we've had, not to end this invasion, but to show how the tide is shifting politically against Moscow if it continues to wage war.
That is very interesting, that development. Great, as always, to get you on. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Beth.